This is
Hi, everyone. I'm Chantal from NSDA. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think this is going to be really interesting with the Ferguson Group because it's a little bit more technical assistance than overviews and updates on more recent grants and what's happening in DC. So this is really going to help you walk through the steps you have to take to be able to access the funding. So I'm going to introduce Christy, Kristen, and Amanda. And I'm going to be the MC for today, and so I'll be watching the chats and the hands being raised. But Christy, over to you.
perfect. Thank you, Chantel. Just for those of you that don't know me or know TFG, I'm Christy Moore and the managing partner of the grants division at the Ferguson Group. The Ferguson Group is the grants provider, grants consultant, and team that supports NSDA grants program. So the three primary folks that you probably see quite a bit are myself and Amanda, and then Kristen Long is joining us today to go over a lot of the logistics and sort of the starting points and getting through the door and in the grant space. I'll let them kind of introduce themselves when they start out their part of the presentation. But as we get into it, this is really what we're going to talk about today. So it's a lot of the basics. It's a lot of the getting in the door, starting out your SAM registration, navigating through some of the forms that we typically see on almost every federal grant, looking at some common first-time mistakes when applying for grants and starting those applications, and then a reminder about some upcoming federal deadlines and proposed legislation that could impact the post-award side of grant management that we wanted to make sure that you special districts understood that what is coming down the pipeline. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda and Kristen, who are really the stars of the show today, and your grant experts walking you through a lot of these topics.
Excellent. Thanks, Christy. I'm Kristen Long. I'm one of the grants principals here at TFG, and I primarily work with local government. So I have a little bit of a local government lens, but honestly, most of the requirements that local governments have are the same things and the same processes that y'all will be going through. So let's go ahead and start. Wait, go back one. I'm not ready yet.
Oh, sorry.
Um, all right, so really, when we're thinking about this, we kind of put the analogy together as we're trying to get through the front door, right? We're trying to get into the space where all the grants are. But before you can get into the door, before you can get into the grant space, you have to get through the door. And sometimes there are gatekeepers, things that are a little bit funky to navigate to try and get through to where the funding is. It's not, none of it's hard. It's just, it's a little tedious because this is the federal government, right? Okay, next slide. So, fun fact. Here's a fact that people may not think about when you're entering the grant space. The majority of the first time grant applications that are rejected from the funding agencies, they've never actually reached a reviewer. A human has never actually put eyes on it. And it's not that the projects aren't worthy. Many of them were excellent projects. They're great. They're disqualified based on administrative technicalities before anybody actually looked at any of the merit criteria. And a lot of these reasons are really preventable. Things like your SAM registration that could have quietly lapsed in the background, wrong forms were attached, deadlines were missed by just a couple of minutes. Unfortunately, you can see a lot of work unravel because of a simple checkbox. So when we're thinking about this analogy of getting through the gate, there's 5 gates that you need to get to before a human touches it and looks at your merit criteria. Number one, you have to actually be eligible. And that sounds really simple, but you need to make sure that your eligibility is in alignment with that particular funding opportunity. Number two, you need to make sure that that SAM registration and your UEI are active and current and not expired. Number three, you've got to make sure that you have the right forms. You have the right suite of forms for your particular project. And number four, you have to make sure that your attachments are complete, they're named correctly, they have all the right nomenclature, formatted exactly the way that the federal government would like to see. And number five, the obvious one, you got to submit it on time. And hopefully, you've been able to get through that process without any last minute terrible drama or trauma. All right, next slide. So before you really start sinking a lot of time and effort into your application, There's 4 basic gut check questions. So this is kind of like, think of it like your pre-flight checklist, right? Things that you want to ask before you or anyone on your team really starts committing a significant amount of time to your grant application. Number 1, we talked about eligibility. Are you really eligible under this grant? Not maybe I think that I'm eligible. You want to actually confirm it. You want to make sure that the right applicant type is in alignment. So you're a special district. Are special districts eligible? Is the funding opportunity limited to a nonprofit or only a state government? Simple things to check, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't check that. You want to make sure that the type of project you want to put forward is actually what they are funding, has eligible activities. If there's a match requirement, are you able to meet that match? Are the activities that you're planning eligible, or have they been specifically excluded in that funding opportunity? Here's where we say don't eyeball it. Don't make any assumptions. There can be many a beautiful application written, lots of work put into it that didn't meet that basic eligibility criteria. Number 2 is that SAM.gov. Is it active? Are you ready to go? So here you want to check your UEI, your legal name, banking details. And here's where one of the sneaky things is it active? Did it expire? Do that early. We're going to talk about this in a lot more detail, but for now, the point to get across with this is don't just think it's fine. I think it's fine. I think my UEI is in good shape. You actually need to log into the system and make sure that you are registered and active. Number 3, do those forms match your project and your budget? So there's a suite of 424 forms that we'll talk about. You want to make sure that all of those are the right forms that you're using and that the budget totals that you have put into those forms are aligning with the budget that you have across all the forms and across your budget narrative. Don't give an opportunity for a reviewer to say, this person didn't know what they were doing. They have a number here that doesn't match this number here, and then you're automatically excluded. And number 4, we preach this a lot when we're working with clients to write grants. We want to submit 48 hours before the deadline, not on deadline day, and preferably not on the day before. Inevitably, you're going to hit a workspace error. There could be an upload problem. Everybody's racing to get their applications in. Everybody is filing at the same time, and there could be some technology issues. And guess what? The federal government does not care if you didn't get your application submitted. They don't have a lot of big feelings about this. So you want to be able to get yourself submitted ahead of that deadline. If you can realistically go through these 4 questions and say, yep, I can check all those boxes, then you are in a great position to move forward. Next slide. All right. SAM.gov. This is the big boy. This is the big front door. We're talking about doors. This is the number 1 big door for every federal grant, full stop. It really doesn't matter what agency, what program, what project. If it's federal money, you're going to go through SAM.gov. And if your SAM is not correct, the rest of it just doesn't really seem to matter. So the next slide, what is SAM.gov? SAM, it stands for the System for Award Management. And in plain English, it's the federal government's official roster of everybody that they do business with. If you want federal money, you have to be on that list. And not only do you have to be on the list, but you have to be active on it. So that, you hear me say that a lot today, is that it has to be an active SAM registration. That's a hard line for submitting any federal application. It's not it's nice to have, you've got to have it. If you don't have it, if you're not active, the system literally won't let you through. You're not going to get through that door. It's not going to open and unlock for you. If you don't have a SAM registration, when you register initially, you will get assigned something called a UEI, or a unique entity identifier. It's a 12-character code, and it basically becomes your organization's federal fingerprint, for lack of a better word. If you've been in this world for a while and you've submitted applications previously, or you're looking through previous grant applications to pull information to maybe carry over, you may see a DUNS number. Don't use that. That number was replaced by the UEI. So if you see DUNS, that's actually gone. Of note, there are entities and companies out there that will tell you, hey, we can do this for you. We can register for you. And yes, they can, but it also comes with a fee. It's not hard to go through the registration process, so save your money and go through and do it yourself. Next slide. So if you are actually registering, and you're going to take this on yourself. There are some steps. If you know what those steps are ahead of time, it can take a lot of the anxiety out of it. I get a little anxious if I don't know what's coming. So here you know what's coming. You begin the whole process by going to login.gov. Here you set up your own account. It's a secure two-factor sign-in, and that again is the front gate to the whole system. Once you do that, you have your entity validation. Here's where you're going to confirm your legal name, your address, your EIN, or your employer identification number, and the system is going to check that against official records. Once that is checked, once that has cleared, now you get your UEI. Now you get your 12-character identifier that I was talking about. Once you have that, you can complete the full registration. Here, when you get into the next complete registration task, is where you're going to enter things like your banking information for receiving of payments, your NAICS, or your North American Industry Classification System. There's a lot of acronyms in this world. If you're unaware of what that code is, it's basically that standard system of the federal government uses to classify the type of business and organization that they do business with. It's a code that says this is the kind of entity that we are. So for special districts, that falls oftentimes under public administration or utilities, categories that are going to be dependent on your district special function. So water, fire, etc. That exact code will depend on your activities. So you get all that in, you hit active status, and that's the green light. Now you can actually submit. Here's the kicker. This can take a lot of time. It typically takes 10 to 15 business days, not calendar days. So if you add in any holidays, any banking closure days, any weekends, you're looking at a couple of weeks, 3, sometimes 4 weeks. Many organizations have unfortunately realized this when it's too late. The deadline is too close. It's too late to get it all together. There's no way to expedite it. So you can't call somebody and say, hey, can you push this through? There's no fast pass. There's no easy way to get around this. So if you don't have that UEI, please, please, please start that way ahead of the deadline, not the week of submission. Give yourself a lot of runway so you have time to prepare that so that you don't end up in a crisis situation, because that is exactly zero fun. Next step, next slide. So the registration takes time. So there are things that can stall it. So under a perfect world, it could take maybe 3 weeks, but there are things that can happen that can make that process slow down even more. The number one culprit is a legal name mismatch. So if your entity name in SAM has to match your IRS record exactly, down to the punctuation. So if you have LLC, L.L.C. will not match, it will not align. If you have a the in your name, but you don't have it in your SAM entry, it's not going to align, and it's just going to be a hiccup. It's very unforgiving. It's a very precise system. If it's not in alignment, it's not going to go through. Same with your address, things like suite, unit numbers, if you spell out the word road or if you abbreviate it, all of that has to align perfectly and exactly with your IRS or the state record that's on file. It feels super duper nitpicky because it is super duper nitpicky. And honestly, the system doesn't really care about our feelings. They just want it to be exact and precise. Again, the third one is that EIN or the TIN. That's the employer identification number or the taxpayer identification number. If there's any sort of a mismatch, if you transpose numbers when you put them in, it's not going to go through. So to make sure that you have the right number, you can pull your original IRS document that assigned your EIN and put it in straight from that. Don't do it from memory. Memory is where errors can happen. And the last mistake can be a real heartbreaker, especially because it can be very well intentioned. Don't fall into the trap of, hey, I submitted all of my forms and I submitted all of this request and nothing has happened, so maybe it didn't go through, so let me submit it again. If you're feeling anxious and you're wondering, please resist that urge with everything you've got. Submit it once and wait. If you resubmit, now you've created a duplicate record, and untangling all of those duplicates, it can really just delay that process. It can make things take longer than it would have if you just waited. I say it all the time in the grant space, you have to pack your patience in anything related to grant funding. And this is the very first example of when you need to start packing that patience. So hang in there, submit it, and then just wait to get the results. All right, next slide. So here we are. You have fought the fight, you have won, you have your UEI, you are registered, you are active, everything is good to go. Getting active is only half of the job here. Staying active is the other half, and it's the part a lot of people forget. The registration has to be renewed every 365 days. If it happens to lapse, it does not give you a grace period. It will immediately block your awards and your payments. So if you have won a grant, money's flowing, things are rocking and rolling, doing a great job, and your registration quietly expires in the background, now your money's going to stop flowing. That's terrible. Nobody wants that to happen. Payments freeze. It's just not great, but it's avoidable. So you can go ahead and set a calendar reminder, do a renewal reminder. I would suggest putting it on multiple people's calendars so it doesn't slip. Try to do it 60 days before the expiration date. Not the day of. You want to do it 60 days out so that you've got some breathing room. There's also another key piece of this. If any of your key details change, like your legal name, your address, your banking information, or your authorized representative, you have to go back into SAM and update it within 30 days of that change. If you change your administrator, this is the one, the person who actually has the keys to the account, it's not just a quick edit. You can't just go into SAM and update it and say, yep, Sally Smith was my administrator, Kristen Long is my new administrator, all good to go. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Even though everything is tries to be electronic these days, you actually have to print a letter, get it notarized, put it in the mail, wait for the person to receive it on the other end, and process it. So if you know that a staff change is coming, if you know that somebody's not going to be here or cannot hold that role of the authorized representative, start that process as soon as you possibly can so that you're not scrambling to find that notary to get everything uploaded and changed and current in time for your grant submission.
And Kristen, can you have two authorized?
Typically, it's one, but there have been cases where you can that person can assign it to other people. There's an assigning process. Yep.
Like a backup.
Um, okay. All right. Next slide. Okay. So we're getting into actual grant writing, how to get yourself organized to prepare that grant application. So you have your registration, you're good to go, you're current, it's time. It's time to go ahead. The solicitation has opened. Um, our recommendation really for all of these is read the NOFO, read it again. When you think that you understand it, you want to read it again. Um, and then probably honestly read it one more time. It sounds so simple, but genuinely it's one of the most critical steps in this process. So many grant applications that are prepared are disqualified because of a simple mistake that was made in following the directions that are outlined and prescribed in that funding opportunity. Um, Whatever the solicitation is called for your program, whether it's the NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, whatever it's called, that is your guidebook, that's your playbook. And you want to follow the rules and the directions of that playbook to the letter. We're very precise in this world. Um, Next slide. So when we're talking about dissecting this grant solicitation, you want to systemically get into this solicitation. So you're really going to tear it apart. Number one, we talked about eligibility. We talked about that a little bit before, but again, you want to confirm that your organization is actually qualified before you invest all the time and energy in preparing that grant application. So things like, of course, the entity type, but there could also be geographic restrictions. USDA has a lot of very specific rules and regulations about what are eligible locations, and they have maps that are available. So you could go onto their website and you can say, I'm applying for this grant, type in the address, and it will tell you, are you in an eligible location or not? Um, Anything like that, you want to make sure that you have checked all of those boxes so that you know that you've passed threshold one, you're ready to go. The second one is the agency priorities. And this is, again, you need to read it very carefully because we need to be looking at things coming out of the executive orders and the administration priorities. So, in these funding opportunities, the agencies are describing their programs and how they align with the current political landscape. And the reviewers are putting on their application reviewer lens through that same landscape. So you want to really study that language that the agency is using. You want to mirror it as best you can in that narrative. You want to make it very, very easy for that reviewer to say, yep, I can see how that project explicitly advances this priority. If you bury it, if you bury the lead and you make it confusing or it's not very simply spelled out, and the reviewer has to work to see to make those connections, then you've already lost some points. Um, Eligible use of grant funds. Understand exactly what the money can and cannot pay for before you build your project concept around it. So most all of these funding opportunities have an explicit list of eligible costs. You want to make sure that your project is in alignment with those costs. Project readiness. Many programs want to see that your project has completed certain design or programmatic milestones, or is what they call shovel ready. So, again, you really just want to see what they're looking for and make sure that the project that you're preparing is in alignment with that. We also want to talk about the amount of funding available. So the total amount of funding and the award range is typically listed within that funding opportunity, and that will help you calibrate your ask, right? So if your program has $20 million available and an award maximum of $100,000, you certainly don't want to put a budget for it that's above that, right? You want to make sure that you're in there. Um, Also, another good thing to do is to look at previous awards. So, of course, every funding opportunity every year can change a little bit. Some of these that are cyclical, and it can say we had X amount of money available, and you can look and see how many awards were made and the typical amount of that award. So, looking in the past to see the types of projects, the type of amount of funding that was available can help guide you in your ask so that what you're putting forward is realistic in the eyes of the funding agency. Again, always staying within the context and the guidelines of the current solicitation. When we're talking about matching requirements, you want to be sure that you can indeed meet that cost share requirement. If there is a match requirement, how are you going to meet it? Are you planning on doing in kind, and is that eligible for this program? If it's a cash match that's required, how will you meet that? Where will that come from? How will you be able to certify that in your grant application? Because you're going to have to demonstrate, I have to put forward a $20,000 match. Here's the account where it's going to come from. So we need to be able to have all of that as you're pulling it together. The reporting requirements can be tricky. You want to make sure that you know what you're committing to before you actually write it and before you actually get the money, right? So you want to know, how intensive is this reporting? Nothing's free with the federal government. So what does that quarterly reporting look like? What is the data collection? What are the milestones and the deliverables that that agency is looking for? Are you going to be able to meet that? So every grant application should have a post-award requirement section. So they'll let you know what's required so you can gauge that and you can say, yeah, I can do that. I've got staff that can handle that. Or I don't know if I can do that. I might need to build into my budget having some post-award staff, or this is just way too much work and we're not interested in this at all. So definitely make sure you review that. And finally, the project period, the timeline. Make sure that the timeline that you put forward is realistic. If it's a 3-year project period of performance, having your whole project completed in a year probably isn't great. Same, you don't want to put a project forth that's 4 years to complete. So just make sure that you're in alignment with everything that is prescribed. If you're like me and you're old school, it's helpful sometimes to print out that NOFO and get a highlighter and highlight all of these things. I know my electronic people will cringe, but that actually is helpful, and you can make notes and say, yep, this is, yeah, I can do this. This makes sense.
Kristen, we had a couple questions.
Yes,
So if this is a good time to jump in.
sure.
We changed our email from a .org to a .gov. How do I update that email in SAM? And the other one was my special district changed the mailing address. How can I update that in the SAM.gov account?
So you need to think the email you can update directly in SAM.gov. I think you can go through and double check, but actually, I think with the address too. You just need to go into that SAM.gov into your account and start updating. It will give you an alert if there is something that needs to be sent in on top of that, if there needs to be additional documentation. Really, it's just the AOR, the authorized representative, that needs to have the notary letter. That
Great,
helpful?
thanks.
Okay. Um, yes, next slide. So when we're organizing our application, sometimes there's the use of AI. This comes up a lot. How can AI help? This is a great tool for AI is to create that skeleton outline. But then you also have to make sure you go back behind it and make sure that it didn't hallucinate and make something up that was very incorrect. But it is helpful to put it in and say, hey, give me a list of what are the prompts and how do I respond to them. Make sure if you're using AI or if you're being old school like me, that you write out all those required sections and the outline headings. It really keeps you anchored to those grant requirements as you're writing it. Set up your grants.gov workspace as early as possible. As soon as you know that you're going to go for this grant, open it up. Don't wait until the deadline is approaching. It will give you the full package of what your application will entail. Now, there are other federal portals. A lot of these entities are starting to come up with their own application portals. So again, you want to find the right one. Most go through grants.gov, but Department of Transportation has their own, EDA has their own, and DOJ I know has their own. So all of those, open up the portal and it will give you the list of everything that needs to be included in that application. You can go ahead and download the forms. Many of those are able to be completed online, but again, if you're like me and need to see on paper, if you download it, you can see exactly what you're working with from the onset, right? You can get a good picture of these are all of the things that need to be completed. Part of that is making sure that you know who is responsible for what. So as you're pulling this grant application together, it's not just, hey, this is my story and this is how much money I need, but you need somebody that's actually looking at the dollars and cents to make sure that your budget is a-okay, everything's perfect, right? You need somebody that could be in charge of doing your letters of support. Who is doing that outreach? Are you dividing up the grant writing among different groups of people or depending on their expertise? Make a calendar, make a schedule, and then make sure that people keep to that. But the more organized or type A you are about this, the easier it's going to flow and the easier it's all going to come together. And lastly, make sure that you're paying super close attention to the formatting requirements. It is very explicit in these opportunities of things like page limits, character word counts, font size, margin characteristics. All of those, they're not suggestions. Those are not maybe you should do this. That's what the funding agency wants to see. And if you don't follow those, you can be excluded. Page number is a big problem because a lot of times they're asking you to put a significant amount of information in a very short and condensed. And sometimes you can accidentally bleed something very important onto page 11 of a 10-page grant. They're not even going to look at page 11. So if you had something very critical that was on that last page, it's gone. It's in the ether. They're never going to look at it. So make sure that you're following all of those and keeping it in alignment with your page limits. All right, next slide. There's a lot of information and some cute little graphics. So these are the common things that we see in most grant narratives. It doesn't really matter what type of grant you're writing, what entity or agency you're writing for. These are the common things that we're going to see across the board. One is that executive summary. So if you've never written a grant before, think of your executive summary as kind of like your elevator pitch in paragraph form. It's usually going to be the first thing that a reviewer reads. And sometimes, if I'm honest, it might be the only thing that a reviewer reads because they may go through that executive summary and say, yeah, I don't like that project. It doesn't fit. It's out. So you want to make sure that you are very clear in that executive summary what you're asking for, who you are, how much money do you need, and why it matters. We suggest writing that section last. So after you've prepared your whole thing, now you can summarize it into that executive summary. It's hard to do a summary if you haven't finished writing your story, right? The next one is your need or problem statement. And this is your chance to make the strong case that there is a real problem that you want to solve. And it's a big enough problem that the federal government should invest in helping solve your problem. Here, you want to lead with as much data as possible. We always say to our clients, give me some teeth, give me some numbers to back things up. I don't want to just say, I have a homelessness problem. I want to say, I have a homelessness problem of 25%. Whatever that number is that goes in there, you need to put a number. Reviewers are looking for numbers. They trust those numbers. Also, have a citation of those numbers. You want to make sure you can back up what you're saying. And then you want to tie all of that into your specific community or your district. A national statistic is always a nice hook to compare it to, but the more local data that you can provide, the stronger the story becomes, and it becomes more convincing to the person who's reviewing it. The project description, here's basically your scope of work. Here's where you're going to detail out what you're going to do. It's your nuts and bolts of the project itself. So you want to be concrete. You want to be clear. I am going to build X. I'm going to hire X. I'm going to purchase Y, right? You want to be very clear exactly what you're going to do with the money and also how that is going to solve the problem that you just laid out. Um, it should read like a plan, not a vision statement. So it needs to see, you need to be able to demonstrate to reviewers that you've thought through how you're going to achieve these goals, not just what the goal is and how that investment from the government is going to help you achieve those goals. We talked a little bit about the timeline, but here the timeline again, this is your roadmap from award to completion. So you want to break that timeline into easy phases or milestones, and you want to put some realistic dates in there. Um, you could say like, quarter one, quarter two, or by the end of whatever year. Whatever you're doing, you need to make sure it matches the particular period of performance that's outlined. But you also want to make sure that it's realistic, right? You don't want to say, I'm going to do this great project and I'm going to be so great, I'm going to solve the problem in 3 months, because that's not realistic and that doesn't make sense. So you want the reviewer to say, hey, that timeline, that jives, that makes sense. That team could actually pull that off. So you want to be as realistic as possible. Um, Number 5, goals, objectives, outputs, and outcomes. So these are 4 words that get used interchangeably. But grant reviewers want you to know the difference, right? So the goal, that's your big picture change that you're after. The objectives, those are those specific or measurable steps that you take to achieve the goal. The output is what you're going to produce. That's the tangible deliverable. That's the data report. That's the number of homeless people served, whatever that output is. And the outcome, that's going to be your actual impact on those deliverables. How does that impact the actual people that are being affected by this grant? If you nail this section, your reviewer is going to be, yep, that's beautiful, fund it. Um, Organizational capacity and background. This is your chance to answer all the reviewers' unspoken questions about, can this organization actually deliver? Here's where you want to talk about your track record. Let's praise all the great things that you've done in the grant space. You want to talk about your relevant past projects. We want to talk about how great your staff are, how much experience they have, and any partnerships that you're going to bring in that will strengthen your ability to execute that grant. Don't be shy here. You want to make your people sound as best as possible. You want to nail this section, right? Um, False modesty is not going to win points, but reviewers, they want reassurance that they're not handing money to an organization that's going to be in over their head and just not have the expertise to be able to manage that project. Let's see. When we're talking about sustainability, the federal funders are always going to ask, what happens after the money runs out? Is this project going to continue? How are you going to maintain what you built? How are you going to keep programs running or replacing the equipment down the line? So this section is about proving to the reviewer that your project isn't a one-time flashy thing. It's actually something that's going to last in perpetuity or for whatever would be appropriate for that project that you have put together. So be realistic about how you can sustain that project after the period of performance ends. And then last but not least is your budget. And here we talked about your budget before, but again, your budget needs to tell the same story as your actual narrative. So if your narrative is describing activities that are not included in your budget, or if the dollar amounts that you've referenced somewhere in your narrative or in your form is not aligning with your budget, that is one of the easiest ways to lose credibility and you're going to get kicked out of the review. Every line item should have a clear and justifiable connection back to the project that you just described in your narrative. So making sure that those are all in alignment is key. Next slide, or we can ask some questions. Keep going. Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think we keep going. I'm not seeing any new questions.
Excellent. Okay. So federal forms. Federal forms are exactly zero fun. So let's go ahead and say that. Most federal grant applications have a standard set of forms that you must complete in addition to your narrative. You put all the work into this beautiful narrative. Now we have to have the forms that are going to support that. They can be as simple as an application cover sheet. It can be as complicated as a budget. And then there's also some legal assurance documents. Um, they're paperwork, but they're all actually part of your official application. So they need to be completed accurately and precise and to the dollar. So all of these things, if there's an error on any of these federal forms, it could delay or unfortunately disqualify your application as a whole. So the first form on the next slide is well, I have a suite of these. So these are the most common forms that you're going to encounter across most grant programs. And we'll talk about these more in a little bit depth. The first one is the 424. That's your overall application for federal assistance. And basically, this is the cover sheet for your application. This is the basics. This is who I am. This is my congressional district. This is one sentence of my project. This is how much money I'm asking for. It's just like a here I am introduction. The 424A is the budget form for non-construction projects, and the 424B is for non-construction assurances. 424C is for construction projects. D is construction assurances. And then there's the disclosure of lobbying activities. And I breeze through that because we talk about these in more detail on the next slide. So again, the 424, this is your standard cover sheet. This is the first form that a reviewer is going to see when they open up your application. So again, here's that word again. You've got to be accurate. You've got to be precise all the way through. This has all the basics about your organization, your legal name. You want to make sure that jives with everything else. Your address, your UEI number, congressional district, and then your project. Like, here's the title of my project. Here's how much I'm asking for. Here's when I plan on implementing the project. It also, in grants.gov, it will auto-populate the assistance listing number that aligns with your project. But just make sure that it's all aligning. You don't want to get disqualified because something weird happened in grants.gov. And similarly, double, triple check every single field. An error in the 424 is a real common but an easily avoidable mistake. Okay, so the next ones are the budget forms. So these honestly are some of the most well, the whole things are scrutinized, but here they really look at these very, very detailed. So there's two different forms. One is for construction, one is for non-construction. An easy way to remember it, if it has a C, it's for construction, right? Both of these forms are going to require you to organize your costs by category and show how the federal funds are going to be used. So the budget here has to be reasonable, it has to be justified, and it has to be aligned. So you want to make sure that you're putting something in based on a quote or based on some information that you have from a previous project. You need to justify it. A lot of times we're starting to see budget narrative forms that they're providing as part of your grants.gov package. It's an Excel-based spreadsheet, which kind of breaks down all of these line items. And they ask you specifically the justification for this line item. So I'm requesting a drone for my DOJ project. Why am I requesting? I have no idea how much a drone costs. Make up a number, $10,000. Why am I requesting $10,000? Because that is a reasonable quote that I pulled from working with X vendor, or research has shown that this is a reasonable price. Whatever you put, you just got to be able to back it up. And again, I'm saying it so many times, I'm tired of hearing myself say it. Make sure that everything matches up. Make sure that what you're putting in your narrative is what's in your budget form. If you say in your narrative, I am requesting 3 drones for my project, make sure that you have 3 drones reflected here in your budget so that everything is in alignment. The next slide talks about assurances. There's a 424B, which is your non-construction, and D for construction. And these are basically, it's a lot of words, but basically you're certifying that your organization is going to confirm compliance with a bunch of federal requirements. I would highly suggest having your legal team go through this and make sure that you are in compliance. But these are simple signatory forms. There's not a whole lot of filling out other than name, authorized person, and date. The types of assurances that you would agree to are the Hatch Act, which it governs the political activity of certain types of employees. There's the Davis-Bacon Act, which has the prevailing wage requirements, and also any NEPA or Environmental Policy Act, audits, ethics standards, that sort of thing. Just be aware that by signing these, your organization is making a legally binding commitment that you're going to uphold all this. So make sure that legal looks at it and or whoever the authorized representative is reviewing before they sign so they know what they're signing. The next form on the next slide is the disclosure of lobbying activities. So this is required when any federal funds may have been used to influence a federal action that's related to your application. So the purpose is twofold really here. It's to prevent the use of federal funds for lobbying and to monitor lobbying expenditures by federal funding recipients. So if if you haven't engaged in lobbying for your grants, you typically certify that. Oftentimes, funders will include this in your required forms package in grants.gov. If that's the case and the form is there and you did not have any lobbying, you still need to submit it as either blank or you put not applicable. Just make sure you're following the instructions carefully, so that you're not forgetting to submit this form, which leads me to the next. These are the typical form problems that we see on the next slide. So it's kind of like here's your greatest hits of the mistakes that we see a lot, the worst offenders, right? Number one, make sure again, you're probably really tired of me saying this, make sure that your legal name that you put on the 424 matches your SAM.gov name. It sounds so silly and trivial, but it has to match exactly down to the punctuation. Very particular. The system checks for this, and if it's not a close match, if it's not an exact, it has to be an exact match, not a close one. Sorry. Number two, and this probably is the most common error form that we see if that budget number does not align. So make sure whatever number you put in the 424 reconciles perfectly with whatever 424 budget form it is, whether it's the construction or the non-construction. Reviewers are going to look for a mismatch, and if they see a mismatch instantly, you're going to be kicked out because you have something not the same. Third, make sure that you have the correct AOR signature. If it was signed by somebody who's not actually the organized representative that's on file with SAM, or somehow if it was dated after the submission timestamp, which would mean that you signed it after it was sent in, all those are red flags and it can stall or it could sink your application. And then back to these assurances, making sure that the assurances are complete. Sometimes it can trip people up. They think that there could be a NEPA assurance that they think that their water project doesn't apply to, but they find out the hard way that actually it triggered something, or there was something historic that they thought, I don't think my water project needs historic preservation review, but it went through a historic area. Don't assume anything in the assurance space. Make sure that anything that could apply has been checked off the box. Even if your project is really small and straightforward, you want to make sure that you have the right assurances accounted for. And then there's this lobbying form, and this trips up a lot of people. So there's two separate things happening with the LLL with the lobbying certification. Anytime you apply for a federal award over a $100,000 threshold, you have to sign a statement. That's built into the SF 424. So it's automatic. It's promising that you did not use federal funds to lobby for that award. Everybody signs it, every application, every time, universal, done. The second is that actual LLL itself, that disclosure of lobbying's form. Filling it out can mean two different things. If you paid someone with non-federal funds to lobby on your behalf, you complete the form with all that information of who that person was. That's a real disclosure. If you didn't lobby at all, you still have to complete it, meaning if it's in grants.gov, you still have to put not applicable or mark it blank or submit it. You're not disclosing anything by doing that. You're just satisfying the system's requirements to have that form in the package. So the way to keep it straight, and it gets confusing, is do I put lobbied information on it? That depends on if you actually lobbied. Sign the certification once you cross the $100,000 threshold in the 424. Attach the LLL if the package requires it, but only put in lobbying details if there's actually lobbying to report.
And Kristen, is that lobbying the federal government?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Open, we have a question. I'm not clear on the SFLLL. Does meeting with an agency staff to discuss a project of interest proposed as lobbying? I know that that's always a big question because there's a difference between lobbying
Yeah.
and educating.
Right. If you are meeting to discuss your project, that would not count as lobbying. We meet with funders all the time to talk about projects. Most often you get what's kind of a side discussion. Most often you have better response talking to agencies about your project before the funding solicitation opens up. Um, but you can still ask them questions about the project once the solicitation is open and things are moving along. But the short answer to that question is no. Reaching out and talking about your project is not the same as, hey, you need to fund my project because it's the best one. Um, what was the last one? Oh, Davis-Bacon. So you want to make sure that whatever you're signing for Davis-Bacon, um, it's a prevailing wage. So if it's a federally funded construction project, that can come into play because it can add like 15 to 25% of your labor costs. So make sure you're thinking about that and accounting for that in your actual budget. Um, the thing with all of these, especially the LLL and the Davis-Bacon, those are often reinterpreted as time goes on based on executive actions and executive orders. So make sure that you have um, check to see what's happening, and you're using the most recent guidance for all of those. And I think that's it for me. I'm going to stop talking.
All right, take it from here. Thanks, Kristen. All right, now let's transition now that we've talked about getting through that front door, starting the application. Where's the money right now? So let's get to talking about what's available right now and down the pike. So a few opportunities that are currently open. So we know these are active programs. The FEMA BRIC program federal deadline is approaching. The internal state deadlines have since passed. But it was a very tumultuous year for the program. It's now back. Typically comes out on an annual cycle in the fall and winter months. So keep an eye out for that in the near to intermediate future. There's a few water smart programs that are open, including drought response and enhancing water resources. We got word that the NOFOs for WEEG and planning and project design will be made available this fall for water districts and irrigation districts that are interested in these types of programs in the West. And for our rural hospital districts, currently open is a small healthcare provider quality improvement program. Take a look at this for any programming needs you might have. And anticipated coming up pretty soon here, we anticipate Build will be returning this fall. Of course, the FY26 award were just announced last week. And out of the 127 awardees, 11 were special districts. And you might have seen NSDA announce which ones those were. Those were mostly port and transit authorities and in our states of Texas and Washington. Those are member states. TFG confirmed with DOT that Rural and Tribal Assistance Program will be returning again this calendar year. They wouldn't give us a month, but we know that's coming up soon for those who are in need of feasibility studies and other preliminary engineering work for transit type projects. For our library museum districts, IMLS grants are expected to be made available mid-August with some November deadlines, so keep an eye out for those. And our fire districts well know that the FEMA Fire Suite with Assistance to Firefighters grants, SAFER, FP&S, those just closed last month. And they had a bit of a wonky timeline this year with the Department of Homeland Security shutdown at the beginning of the year. So if all settles back into its usual cadence, we should see those new solicitations in the late fall, winter time. Alrighty, next slide. Okay, NSDA has done a great job of making sure member districts got involved in this process. So many of you are likely aware that there was a proposed rule posted by the Office of Management and Budget that seeks to overhaul the current guidance for federal financial assistance. The proposed rule was made available at the end of May for comment, and the window to provide feedback closed just this past Monday. And I believe at the end there were nearly 500,000 comments or something close to that submitted. So safe to say that the zone was definitely flooded, and OMB heard response. NSDA collected feedback on potential impacts from the rule changes and submitted comments on behalf of the group. So across the board, NSDA heard that members were concerned about potential termination of grants at any time, review and cancellation by political appointees that increases the political aspect of grant review that might create some bottlenecks for districts. Members were concerned about the lack of consultation process about the rule proposal, and NSC also heard that members were concerned about impacts to municipal bond ratings and project delivery. So keep in mind that the targeted effective date for these changes is October 1st. We don't know yet what the impact of the comments will be or what the changes will look like quite yet. So keep your eye on NSDA communications because we will be monitoring this closely and letting you know how the new guidance will impact districts and what you should be preparing for in the future. And just to wrap up here, we have some of our regular announcements and a review of our services. So coming up in September, we have our last Lunch and Learn in the series. That's on September 9th. It's making the case and managing the grant from board buy-in to post-award. So many districts face organizational barriers to grants, including limited staff capacity and difficulty securing board support. So this session will cover how to make the internal case for a grants program, how to set realistic expectations for staff time, and understand the requirements of post-award management. So stay tuned for registration coming up for that in September. All right, and of course, as members, you have access to NSDA grant services. If you have a project in mind, feel free to submit that project and any other funding needs to our NSDA Project Idea portal. It's an easy to use online tool. You should be able to fill everything out pretty quickly and we will get back to you within 48 hours. You can also directly book a time with us through NSDA grant office hours. We have plenty of time slots available, and if what is available doesn't work for you, just send an email to nsdagrants@tfgnet.com and we can set up an alternative time. And of course, last plug for that Lunch and Learn webinar, sign up for that as soon as it becomes available. So keep your eye out from NSDA and your state associations for that registration. And that covers it for us. And we can open the floor
Well,
for
I'll just add also, just to wrap that last slide up, also, of course, the Ferguson Group offers discounts for our members to do, if you want to go deeper with their assistance from grant writing to contract compliance to monitoring to closeout. You can also access that service as part of your benefit of being a member. So we've been hearing some great success from individual districts who've hired the Ferguson Group to do that with them. It's a great benefit. Sorry, Amanda. Back to you. Oh, okay, so here's a question. I submitted a grant application for the FEMA FSNP opportunity recently, and I'm looking for the information on how to track the status of the grant. I looked on grants.gov, but it asks for a tracking number. How do I find that tracking number? That
If
might
you,
be for Kristen.
yeah, if you submitted it in grants.gov, it's been a little weird lately, but if you go and you log in and you're the one that submitted it or you were active in that workspace, if you clear, it's kind of confusing. On the top right, it has a bunch of little boxes. So if you clear all of those, it should show any application that you submitted. So it would show as submitted or in progress or archived. So try going into your accounts and then unchecking all of those boxes, and it should populate, allegedly. If it's working like it should populate.
Yeah, so Jennifer, give it a try right now. We have a few
And
minutes
Kristen,
more.
if it's not there, they don't see it, then would they be able to just reach out to the program officer and clarify or ask?
Yeah, yeah. You also should have it should have a confirmation in an email when you submit. You should get an email from grants.gov with the confirmation that your grant has been submitted. So you can also try and check there, see if that also has it.
And Stephanie and Danielle, did you guys try your new email or your new address yet? See if it was working? And put it into the chat. Any other questions? We have your experts online. So Danielle says, I believe I have to renew the entity in order to change the address. Working on that now. Good. Well,
And if you guys have
I've
and
definitely
any
seen some examples of, sort of the Lake City versus the town of Lake City, and
Mhm.
it got flagged. Just things like that, or that you're so used to using your name. And I notice with a lot of districts, um, the legal name, may be the something library, the something county library district. And oftentimes it's really known as, Ouray County Library. And sometimes with districts, the word district isn't used in the everyday nomenclature. And so it's easy to forget that. So, okay, so Stephanie is saying she looks like she needs to renew the entity. At the same time, she's just nervous updating it because it's a multi-million-dollar large open grant. I think generally speaking, it seems like because there's just so much media and coverage around federal funding that people are feeling kind of anxious about the process. Can you wrap up with sort of your thoughts on that? Is it the time to be concerned? Is it the time to just keep your head up and keep going because these processes haven't really changed too much? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure, I'll wrap up and give my comments, and then would love to hear Kristen's perspective too if she has anything to add. But I would say no. I mean, yes, there are changes happening. There are changes happening on the NOFO side in terms of what the federal agencies want to see funded and how that's being written into the grant applications. That's very traditional. Changes happen all the time in terms of the requirements and where the federal funding agencies actually want to see the dollars go to. We have to keep in mind that grants are political by nature. They are trying to fund elements in the communities or in the local space that are priorities for that funding agency. So it's not unusual to see shifts in priorities. We've even seen them shift within a current administration. So within one administration, we'll see grant programs change or be modified. Most of the time, they're not drastically disrupted, though. They're just kind of tweaks or changes in the priorities, and therefore that might change some of the requirements for the grant for the application itself to meet those priorities. On the post-award side or the reporting side, yes, there are changes, as Amanda went over. There is probably one of the most collectively and broadest changes and deepest changes in the rulemaking that's before OMB right now. We're still not sure if that's going to go through or if every component that is being proposed will go through. Some of those elements have actually already been incorporated into the compliance side of federal funding. And it's important to understand that OMB rulemaking actually applies to all federal funding, not just grants, and so that's a distinction there. Overall, though, that is typically not different. We saw changes on the compliance side in the past as well, but it is something that you should watch out for. I know that NSDA did weigh in on behalf of districts, which was good to see. So But overall, I would not be nervous. There is tremendous benefits in federal funding to special districts, in particular in some of the smaller grants and that programs that are kind of out of the political target, so to speak. So Amanda went over a lot of the big grants and a lot of the traditional grants that we know that special districts follow, but there's much more funding out there. And it's really just understanding ahead of time. That's our biggest piece of advice. Don't shy away from them. Keep on going and use us as a resource to kind of answer those questions so that you do feel secure and you are comfortable. And most importantly, that you're ready to apply for the application and receive those funds and put them to use in your community.
Great. So keep your head up and keep going.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Your states, well, we cover only federal grants for NSDA through the program. We do also do work in each of the states that are NSDA states and members on state grants as well. So we focus all of our reporting and all of our training on the federal side through our partnership with NSDA. But if you do have questions on the state side in terms of states grants, those are our services are able to help in that as well. That kind of is the extension that Chantel mentioned. So you'd have access to us to be able to help you with those state grants. When we do go into strategic planning partnerships with individual districts, we actually look at all types of funding, so not just federal. So keep that in mind too. While there might be changes on the federal side, there's a tremendous amount of money out there available for special districts from your states, as well as private investment and foundation funding.
Yeah.
So don't shy away from those either.
That's true. Takes a village.
It
Okay,
does.
great. Well, Kristen, and Amanda, thank you very much. We'll wrap this up, and we've put some emails and some phone numbers in. If you need any follow-up, please don't hesitate. We're here to help. So thank you, and keep an eye out for the next webinars coming up.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody. Bye.